With a new Archon and a new nation just around the corner, anticipation is at an all-time high. Be it because everyone is eager for more lore, new artifacts, new gear, or everything in between. There's no denying the excitement in the air. We've been to 3 out of the 8 nations we know of so far, and each one is unique, being loved or hated by the people for various reasons. From the wind-swept valleys of the Nation of Freedom, to the very land punished by the gods themselves. Let's take a look at the continent of Teyvat with these interesting facts. But first, why not head down to our community Discord server? We talk about everything Genshin, including lore and theories, so head down to the description if that's something you're interested in. I'm also going to be live right here on YouTube from here on out. Currently, I am replaying through Teyvat, researching again. So if that sounds fun to you, and you want to interact with me and the community, I will be live Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. PST. But enough of that though. Let's open the Teyvattionary and see what's been uncovered. Mondstadt, the land of freedom and music. Ah yes, the region we all enter for the first time. Who can forget those rolly, breezy hillsides and towering ruins? Or the cutscene we see for the first time. We all know it's a land steeped in not only fairy tales, but the fine arts. Mondstadt takes heavy inspiration from Central Europe, particularly Germany. Germany is a land rich in forests, mountains, old castles, and vineyards. It is a place steeped in history and famous for its cultural impact. One of the most well-known locations there is the Black Forest region of Germany bordering France and Switzerland. The Black Forest is the setting for many of Europe's fairy tales, particularly the stories from the Brothers Grimm. To this day, this forest remains a favorite backdrop for writers, artists, and poets' stories. Mondstadt has a love for music, poetry, and alcoholic drinks. It's home to one of the most famous and well-known wineries in all of Teyvat, the Dawn Winery, owned by Diluc's family. But have you ever wondered why this is such a key part of not only their trade, but their culture as a whole? Once again, this goes back to Germany. Germany itself has been called this, which translates to the land of poets and thinkers. Many famous scientists, authors, artists, and philosophers have all called Germany a home at some point. Germany is also one of the biggest suppliers of beer in the entire world, having numerous beer distilleries scattered around the country. It's literally everywhere. But beer is not the only thing they brew. Wine is also very adored in this country. It's not uncommon to see vineyards throughout the countryside. Liyue, the land of contracts and tradition. A favorite place for many players, and it definitely seems to be one of the game developers' favorites as well. It's the nation of Liyue, the prosperous city by the sea. Liyue itself takes very heavy inspiration from the land of China, a country famous for being a land embedded in very deep history, traditions, and tea. China actually wasn't always a single nation. Liyue's own lore reflects this part of history with its own battles and conflicts. Liyue also heavily mirrors Chinese cosmology and legends. Long ago, China consisted of many smaller countries, and it wasn't until later that it unified into one nation. Has come and gone through the ages. But China remains a land rich in culture and memory, just like Liyue is today. The people of ancient China actually were the ones to invent fireworks. This we learn to be true in Liyue as well, with Ningguang and Keqing during Lantern Rite giving us a little history lesson on the origin of Liyue's fireworks. Back then, fireworks were a means to alert people, scare enemies, and were used as a signal. Today, just like in Teyvat, fireworks have become widespread forms of celebration, and a popular addition to any major event or festival. Beloved for their brilliant colors that paint the night sky in glowing light. But fireworks are still very dangerous, as Yoimiya has shown us many times in Inazuma. Inazuma, the land of eternity and ambitions. Now that I've mentioned it, let's go to one of my personal favorite places, the land of eternity itself. Inazuma, as I'm sure many of you are aware, takes its inspiration from Japan. Japan, just like China, did not start out as a single nation. That came later in history after feudal Japan and its many conflicts. Japan is also a land born of ancient culture and a long history. They put a strong value on, as Inazuma puts it so beautifully, the warrior's way. They take this code of honor seriously, to the point that it's a big part of Inazuma's laws itself. Too bad Senora learned that lesson a little too late. Japan itself is also a land drowning in legends and spirits, such as the yokai and gods of nature. There are so many, it can be hard to keep track of. Thanks to the events of the main story, and especially part 2 of A Story Quest, we have learned a few things along the way. The biggest question we had was, what eras of Japan is Inazuma taking inspiration from? Inazuma, when we first arrived, was based around the Meiji era, a time when Japan closed its borders off from the rest of the world. It was a time of strife, as Japan regained its control on its independent trade. But with the borders opening at the end of A's quest, Inazuma has now entered something resembling the Taisho period. This is a major milestone for Japan in history, as they made many advances, changes, and yes, opened its borders back up to the world. Even their clothing began to change. And a good example of this is actually Ayato Kamisato's design. What will this mean for Inazuma now that time is moving forward for them again? Nobody in the land of the Electro Archon knows for sure, but it will no doubt bring many good things along with the bad. Sumerum, the land of wisdom and knowledge. The land of scholars is just around the corner, and everyone's pretty excited, including myself. Sumeru seems to be taking heavy inspiration from the Middle East. To be more exact, it seems to take a large chunk of inspiration from the Achaemenid Empire. The Achaemenid Empire covered almost the entire Middle East, taking over parts of modern-day Egypt, Israel, Arabia, smaller parts of India, and many other nations. But the most notable detail is that Sumeru was actually a real nation in the Middle East that the Persians conquered and swallowed up into the ancient Persian Empire. This was known as Sumer. It may even be a reference to Mount Meru, a sacred mountain believed to be the center of both the spiritual and the material worlds. Many myths surround this mountain, including the beings known as Nagas. So we can definitely expect heavy influences from the Middle Eastern cultures, such as Hinduism, once we finally arrive. I think you can see where this is going, as the Naga race has been strongly hinted at in the game to not only exist, but be important according to the Three Realms Gateway offering event and Enkanomiya. In fact, snakes are a huge part of Middle Eastern and East Asian cultures. They're seen as not only familiars to the divine, but keepers of knowledge. Not a shocker, as the Middle East and Sumeru are also rich in jungles and deserts, with snakes and the Nagas having a strong link to trees and nature. If you turn your eyes to the Egyptian part of Middle Eastern history, you'll see a pharaoh's crown often has an asp or cobra, which were the symbols of the Egyptian god of protection, Bast. I wonder just how much inspiration snakes and Nagas will have on Sumeru's story and the Dendro Archons themselves. We'll know soon enough, as one of these Nagas may very well be Beidou. Fontaine, the land of law and inventions. Fontaine is another highly anticipated nation set to release after Sumeru. The name itself is French in origin, translating to fountain in English. From what we have learned, Fontaine seems to be taking inspiration from Western Europe, particularly France, and quite possibly England during the Industrial Ages. France itself is well known for its rich culture, fine arts, culinary scene, and its beautiful and lush countryside. It is actually full of gorgeous lakes, streams, waterfalls, and rivers. To this day, it remains one of the world's leading agricultural powerhouses in producing a wide range of crops, including many vineyards for the wine trade. Venti's beta voice lines even hint there might be an industry rival to the Dawn Winery here in Fontaine, producing sapphire wine. France, like much of Europe, is also full of ancient castles, and shares its own mythologies too. Arthurian legends and Celtic mythology played a big part in their pasts, leading to the possibility that the Hydro Archon might be inspired by Undine, or the Lady of the Lake, which would be very fascinating if true. However, we won't know for sure until later in the year 2023. From what we know, Fontaine is in an age of invention, full of cultural and technological advancements. During the French Industrial Revolution, many changes were being made, including to their legal system. During this time, the old regime was swept away by the National Constituent Assembly, completely overhauling their legal system before the assembly ended up dissolving. The legal system was soon further improved with adding far more civil laws and rights. So, does this mean we'll be helping reform Fontaine's currently extreme and brutal legal system? It's a possibility, but we will have to wait and see. Let's hope the Hydra Archon's in a listening mood, because based on her crystal's lore and what people say, she's a dramatic and vain goddess. Natlan, the land of war and warriors. Natlan may have ties to Latin America when it comes to inspiration. Latin America covers almost all of South and Central Americas, including the Gulf of Mexico. This area is rich in volcanic activity, and is part of what is known as the Ring of Fire, a chain of often active volcanoes. One famous volcano is actually right in Mexico City itself, and is still active to this day. The habitats of the areas are humid jungles, arid deserts, and rocky badlands. The indigenous people of this area include the Aztecs, Mayans, Kanchi, Lupaca, etc. The most famous being, of course, the warrior tribes of the Mayans and Aztecs. Both groups, while having violent portrayals in history, are hailed for their genius when it comes to their advancements in astrology, agriculture, and a system for gender equality. There's no denying that the tribes of Latin America were all skilled masters in the art of war, as well as craftsmanship, medicine, and agriculture. The indigenous groups of the Americas were performing successful open brain surgery over 4,000 years ago on a regular basis, with the patients living long lives afterwards. I wonder if we'll see this focus on medicine in Natlan's history. A nation that knows the art of war should also know the art of healing, as we see in the real world. During the Atlantic slave trade, Africans were captured and brought over to the Americas to be used for forced labor. These people, being brought into Latin America, brought with them much of their own culture and teachings that have since changed and evolved to some degree, merging with the indigenous beliefs that already existed in the area, even coming up with unique forms of fighting. The most fascinating being a martial art merger from Brazil and Africa known as capoeira. It's an extremely acrobatic martial arts style that includes dance, song, and self-defense. It was actually invented by these enslaved people to disguise the fact they were practicing combat. The colonizers actually attempted to outlaw dancing multiple times throughout the history of colonialism in the Americas for this exact reason. Maybe this is where they got the inspiration for Natlan's shadowboxing. I think it'd be amazing to see. Snezhnaya, the land of love and eternal winter. The land of the Cryo Archon, the Tsaritsa, is another nation we know a lot, yet somehow so little about. What we have learned so far points to Snezhnaya being strongly inspired by Russia and Serbia. This region is hailed as one of the coldest and harshest places in the world, known for only going from one extreme of temperature to the next. Their springs and autumn are very brief. Tartaglia reflects on this in one of his voice lines. Where I'm from, if we didn't keep moving, we'd freeze to death. Literally. This comes as no surprise, as Russian winters are extremely cold and even deadly. The Russians knew this, letting their harsh culture climate handle the French military when Napoleon made one of the biggest mistakes in history by invading Russia during the dead of winter, resulting in him retreating in shame, while they just had to clean up the mess left behind. There are some troubling hints that Snezhnaya might actually be in the midst of the Russian Revolution, or something close to it. This is hinted at in a few dialogues, but the most noticeable is the Teyvat chapter trailer itself. During this time, the Russian people had lost all respect and love for the Tsar and his family, having had enough of the hardships and neglect they had endured for decades. This ultimately led to the demise of the royal family of Russia. Will we end up in Snezhnaya, just in time to find their people on the brink of rebellion? It's still too soon to say, but one thing is clear: the nation of love is readying for war. The question is when and how. We'll just have to wait and see. Conria, the land of dreams and the Forsaken. Conria is a nation shrouded in dark mysteries, but we have learned a lot recently about it from Dainsleif and Lumine/Ether. Going from the character names and what little cutscenes we have seen, I think it's safe to say Conria, the land of dreams, has taken inspiration from ancient Rome, Greece, and Norway. That's quite a few arid and boreal climate countries. But at the moment, there just isn't enough concrete evidence to support this yet. But it does seem to lean more towards Greek and Scandinavian cultures. Both the Vikings, Greeks, and Romans were miles ahead of their time for much of the ancient world, having made advancements in astrology, navigation, architecture, government, and so much more. Many of Rome's innovations, including running water and road design, are still used today. The Roman Empire fell due to being too large, and the government being corrupt with power and discord. Ultimately, the final nail on the head was invasions from outside nations. Celestia's invasion into Conria seems to point towards this, as Makoto states. No Archon could ignore that place. Celestia's invasion into Conria seems to point to this. The nation was cursed and forsaken by the gods themselves. There is also the possibility it is consumed by the Void Realm, or was even built there originally. Either way, only time will tell. Very recently in the Chasms World Quest, we finally learn what the flowers in Lumine's hair are. The same flower we saw in the meadow in the Teyvat chapter trailer. They are known as Teyvat. If picked, they will wilt like any other flower. But there's a catch. If you take this flower outside of Conrian borders, it becomes hard like resin. In regards to Lumine, if you look closely, it will actually glow the element she has activated at the time, almost like a beating heart. However, in Lumine's version of the timeline, where she is the traveler, she reveals she awoke with it, unsure how she got it in her hair. Meanwhile, Ether only knows it as the flower his sister wears. Dainsleif reveals this flower will turn soft and turn the dust upon the bearer's return to the homeland, making it a symbol of a traveler trying to get back home. This means the beginning and the end of this journey starts in Conria, and will most assuredly end in Conria as well. The question remains though, is this flower field actually this world's Eden or sacred ground where the world tree can be found? That's food for thought for another day though. Well, that about wraps it up for these facts on the nations we know of at the present date. Teyvat was once one united land, and only time can tell what we'll be learning about this place in the future. What secrets will we uncover in Sumeru and the nations to come? I can't wait to see and share these discoveries with every single one of you. I'm stoked. But until then though, I'm gonna go ahead and close the Teyvattionary. Thank you so much for watching.